the one and only Ghassan of Emerge Commerce. Ghassan Halazon, founder and CEO. We're going to try it one more time. Get inside of the show, Hassan. Make sure that
Are we on? Are we live? Is this it?
Is it working? Is it working on your side?
Can you hear me?
Bit of a delay, but I don't know.
Damn.
Yeah, bit of a delay.
A bit of a delay. It does happen. I wonder if we just try camera off. Can we just try camera off, Hassan? Maybe that makes a difference. Let's try it. Maybe turning the camera off. Well, now, Hassan, can you hear me? Are you with us?
I can hear you loud and clear. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can, brother. We appreciate you making the time to join us and fighting your way through the various interwebs to get here. Hassan, I would love to kick this off. I'd love to kick this off just getting some of your background. Man, I know. I often believe this. The riches are in the niches, and man, you guys over at Emerge, you seem to have this very interesting focus inside of golf particularly, but I know you guys have a number of things in your portfolio, but I'd love to get some background on you and how you got here with Emerge today.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I first of all, thank you. I'm a fan of the show, and I will say that it was more of a grind getting on here than it has been doing e-commerce for 15 years.
Oh no!
But jokes aside, sorry, it sounds like it's a problem on our end here today in the building. But anyhow, beside that, let's get down to business, gents. Yeah, so for the past 15 years, all I've been doing is building, buying, selling, restructuring e-commerce brands for a living. Emerge in many ways is sort of a second coming of sorts for myself and the team. My background, as you pointed out earlier in the show today, was in the sort of the Groupon model. We own the largest and fastest growing sort of Groupon of Canada years back. But that was, as many people know, a fizzling model and a loss-making, high churn model. But it did open my eyes to the fact that most of e-commerce is scaled unprofitably for many years. At least that was the original version of e-commerce. Today's e-com rebels, if you will, are sort of more bootstrapped, more focused on, not only gross margin, but profit margins. And there's things like this that we're starting to talk about that we've never talked about before. Emerge actually gets commingled quite a bit with the Amazon roll-up movement, although that's not fair. We were never sort of an Amazon FBA roll-up a la Thrasio and co. But the underlying thesis was a bit similar in the sense that we wanted to buy businesses, much like any other consolidators in various other industries. We wanted to share resources and technology and back office and so forth. I think the big difference between us and why many other aggregators aren't around anymore is that we actually acquired real brands and communities, not just 3, 4, 5 person shops on Amazon that are beholden by the big giant and so forth. So I think Emerge was sort of much like others, we really built up some decent scale, $120 million worth of a bunch of different verticals. But eventually we had to go restructure and clean up post-COVID. That was a big hangover for many in the space. And we decided to double down where we thought we could win big, that being in grocery and golf. Those are our two big verticals. So we own the Butcher Box of Canada, which is called True Local, TRU Local, straight from the farmers. Yeah. And then we own sort of a fast-growing portfolio of golf brands, equipment, apparel, and experiences. So that's kind of where we are today. It's sort of a refreshed, more focused, more centralized model coming out of the hangovers of the COVID and sort of the aggregator world.
I love it. Could you talk to me a little bit about you started on Wall Street during basically the 2008 crash. What did watching the collapse at 22 kind of teach you and help you with while you're trying to basically scale today? What did watching that type of collapse kind of teach you and help you avoid those pitfalls?
It's very interesting. I used to work at Citibank or Citigroup in out of New York when all of that happened. I'll tell you a funny little story real quick. When I used to walk in there, at 388 Greenwich out of Tribeca, there was a huge screen with the Citigroup stock price, and that stock price kept going down and down and down until one day they took it off the screen. And the running joke at the time was that the ATM charge, the charge for you to get your money out, was $2, and Citi share price was $1 something at the time for a brief minute. But I think what's interesting is if you look at, and no one's ever asked me this. This is a pretty cool story and question. You know, when you look at that sort of conundrum where all the big Wall Street banks were and all the markets were, and then you look at the bets that were made at those lows and how things came back. Like the government made tons of money. It was one of the biggest investments and returns they've ever achieved was during those times. So have many others. Many fortunes have been made. So to draw the parallel and sort of looking at e-commerce when it was down and at times when it's not favorable, there are really some really exciting buying opportunities and acquiring. We're not so much focused on distressed anymore, but we are really focused on opportunistic. So as an example, I'll tell you our two most recent acquisitions, the one we did a few months ago and the one we did last year, both were for 2 to 3 times EBITDA. Both were profitable and cash flowing. Both had been around for between 1 and 3 decades, right? So we are now this new emerge. Right, we call it re-emerge, and our new playbook centers around this idea that we can buy boring and make sexy and modernize through our advertising know-how, through technology, dare I say through AI. But you know, the idea is we want to buy out of favor, opportunistic, cash flow positive day one companies, and that's sort of this new version of emerge that we've stumbled on. And so, like, let's say the golf equipment business, Tee 2 Green, we bought for about 2.2 times EBITDA. Founder was 38 years into the business, wanted to retire, wanted a good custodian for the team. And you know, he knew that we knew golf. We took care of our people, and there were some synergies with our 400,000 golf database. And so we put one and one together, and now this is a business that used to grow at 3% a year, is now growing at 33% a year under Emerge.
Whoa! I mean, let's double click on that. So Tee 2 Green cash flow exceeded the purchase price in the first quarter post close. How do you find deals like that, and like how repeatable is that? Because that just seems kind of like a unicorn. I mean, you guys just home run grand slammed that one.
It is, and look, like a year later here, just a few months ago, we acquired this other company that's been around for a decade plus. In that situation, it was a public company in having some debt issues, looking to sell some of these parts, and we had been there. Emerge had been there where we had to sell off, to bring down our debt from 30 million to 5 million. That was exhausting, and we did have to sell pieces. So there are opportunities in special situations like that. You are absolutely right. You couldn't go buy hundreds of companies at 2 times EBITDA right now. I don't believe it. I think some of these companies are worth 2 times, but they're not admitting it. That's a different story. But I do think that you gotta play the long game. So like with this golf vendor, he was a vendor on one of our marketplaces, and he decided to call it quits after a while. Cared quite a bit about his team being treated the right way. Cared a bit less about the price and the multiple and all of that stuff. I mean, occasionally you will get folks who are just, have built this for such a long time and have other personal reasons to leave, or public companies in trouble or anything like that. I think it's special situation stuff, to be honest with you. It's not an everyday thing.
Gosh,
it's wild. This is wild to me.
It's also wild that you casually slipped in the fact that you paid down your debt from 32 million to roughly just under $5 million. What is that playbook? If a founder is trying to do that right now without killing the company, how do you do that? How do I go through this? Because that seems almost an overbearing, overwhelming feat if I'm standing in front of a mountain trying to do that.
Yeah, we didn't kill the company, but we almost killed ourselves trying to do that. It really was an enormous undertaking. And I think just to backtrack a little bit, to go back a little bit to those few tough years post-pandemic, essentially we and many others had bought various companies in record time, raising record capital and using record debt to do so. And suddenly the unwind of that was a choice. So when we looked at this and analyzed it, there was this two components. One was just from a pure math perspective, did we believe that we had certain assets and brands and businesses and teams sitting inside this quote unquote black box that deserved for us to go through the trouble of cleaning this up and selling the other pieces, right? So you had to believe that you were still sitting on something that was highly, highly, highly undervalued. To give you an idea, Emerge is a public company, TSXV Ecom on here in Toronto, and because of the debt situation and the equity holders thinking the debt was effectively going to wipe us out, there was no way around it. Our equity value went down to 1 cent a share, which was $1 million market cap for a little while, and that was at a time when we knew we had tens of millions of dollars of sales. We had 5-6 million in EBITDA, so it didn't matter, right? Because the servicing of interest on the debt and the debt obligations coming due were way too high. So this was the problem everyone had. Now here's the difference: most of them just either bailed, filed for bankruptcy, moved on to do other things. There's all sorts of these companies that are just no longer here. Thrasio itself went bankrupt, obviously came out of bankruptcy, and and to some extent is reviving itself in a different way. We never entered that zone. I sort of made the decision, and along with my team and the folks around us that were supportive of the big picture here, to reset and said, listen, we're going to do this the right way. We're going to go asset by asset, and we're going to sell off any businesses that don't have EBITDA or cash flow enough to service the debt relative to the price we could sell them at. So if someone was giving me someone was giving me 12-13 million bucks for a business that was 2-3 million EBITDA, I would have liked to hang on to it, but that $13 million is well in excess of what this is doing for me right now relative to the debt cost. You got to remember, interest rates climbed to a historic at a historic clip as well during that time. So we went through this exercise rigorously, selling off our pet division, selling off our outdoor gear division. We had a really cool business you might have heard of called BattleBox, which is a pretty well-known e-com name. So that used to be under our portfolio. We like those guys a lot. We have great respect for them. It just wasn't our core competency. We decided to double down where we had number one market leadership positions here in Canada with a fast-growing presence in the US, and then to double down on starting to sell businesses that were declining and acquire businesses that we could grow.
Wow.
This is an incredible it's an incredible story, number one, Ghassan. Number two, I'm still wowed that you are finding now these businesses that have been around for decades, and people are slugging it out to grow a few percentage points each year, and you're buying for 2x EBITDA, 3x EBITDA. And then you're turning on the juice and
30%.
This thing at a 30% clip. I mean,
crazy.
I didn't know that there were opportunities out there like this, and I'm sure there's not a ton, which is why you guys have found them and made it happen. But this is
I'll tell you something else. I appreciate it. Listen, it's credit to the team, to be honest with you. We have an amazing execution team. I will say this too, a lot of this is relationship building through the years. For example, Tita Green was a vendor of ours for years. So he had to trust us, trust the team. In a way, we were both pregnant. We didn't want to lose one of our biggest vendors. He didn't want to, risk selling to someone else and losing out on the team and all of that good stuff. So I think the people part really matters. But I will tell you, this time around, we've been much quieter. We've been heads down. We're not running our mouths as much about these, miracle style deals that we're doing. But I will tell you this, because this is public. Emerge is now even though we were smaller than the peaks of the pandemic when we acquired all those companies, we are a profitable company. We are a cash flow positive company. We are a growing company. And we have market leadership positions in two categories. And we'd love to really go much, much deeper into both grocery and golf.
Oh, man.
That's incredible.
That's exciting.
Could you kind of talk a little bit more about the macro of e-commerce? Potentially, there's one e-commerce trend that everybody's hyped on right now that you kind of are ignoring and just kind of staying laser focused on. Are there any trends right now that you're seeing in the marketplace that you just kind of have to shut the doors on and stay focused and you think will just pass out?
Yeah, you know what? And I don't mean to be like the anti like sexy, right? Like to some extent, I'm starting to look at with my age, but like I really do. I really do think that it's not that I don't buy into some of these things. Like I see all the buzzy stuff. We try to keep abreast and test things and talk to people and so forth. So we do all of that, right? But at our core, I still prefer $1 million in cash flow in my hand for two, 3 times EBITDA that I can then apply the most basic wins. So as an example, Tita Green didn't even market on Meta at all. Forget marketed bad or wrong. Didn't market. So I always, what I tell the team, I know we're not geniuses, but I love deals that make us look like geniuses, right? That's the idea,
for sure.
So we want stuff that we don't want the too hard bucket, as Warren Buffett calls it. We're a strong pass on anything we don't understand or we can't rule, right? I'd rather rule in hell kind of thing, right? So, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean we don't need to be tech forward. We don't need to automate our processes. We don't need to think through, smarter, analytics and all of that. We are investing in it in the background. It's just, I'm not going to act like I'm, sort of A grade with all of that. I think there's a great opportunity for the same reason that billions, if not trillions soon, pouring into SMBs and boring businesses and all of that. I don't mind even within our categories, by the way, meat and seafood subscription. Our prime audience is borderline boomers. Golf, also older, higher income. And what does that all mean? It means they're less likely to refund. They're less likely to price compare. They're less likely to complain. They're more loyal. They care about purpose. So things like buying local, supporting local farmers, even if the price of beef is through the roof, they're sticking by us. So we like this sort of older, out of favor, old school dynamic. And then when we're coming, people are talking about. Forget AI. People starting to talk about quantum. We're talking about adding meta to some of these things. And going 20, 30, 40%, right? So why not, right? But I don't want to run my mouth as much this time. I'd rather everyone go after the sexy. I'll keep the boring, as much as possible for ourselves.
That's incredible.
Smart, man. I know that you have talked to, I'm sure you've seen so many deals. You've talked to so many founders, and Ghassan, as you meet people, you're evaluating businesses, etc. And maybe a founder wants to sell, or they want to sell down the line. And what advice would you give them? Are there some common, kind of missings that come up when you talk to people? You're looking at evaluating their businesses. Is there any advice that you would give to founder at different stages? Like, I'd like to sell in the future. I want to sell in the next 24 months, or etc. Anything that you would offer?
Well, from a pure starting point perspective, I think just having your books in order, cutting out all the personal expenses stuff, like just really keeping track of things so that, obviously you got to operate. Obviously you got to, you can't pump short term. A lot of times transactions take much longer. I see mistake where people are like expecting to sell in 6 months or 4 months. So they pump as much as they can, the promos and this and that. And then suddenly, an acquisition takes another 6 or 12 months and then it reveals itself, right? So I don't think the short game really works all that much. I think staying organized, under promising and over delivering. Like, remember, like the things when you do start speaking to a buyer, or even like if it's a coffee for a first time, if that is the potential buyer that comes back in a year, they're going to remember what you told them you were expecting to do for the year. So there's really no point to oversell. Like, it's way better to undersell and be like, remember what I told you that first time, or that, last year when we sat down, I said I was going to do this. Well, I did that plus 10 or 20% on top. So I feel like the whole under promise, over deliver thing really helps build trust and sentiment. And I think getting the books in order, and I always tell people, like, you learn so much. We're a public company, so we almost take this for granted, but, like, we've been audited for years. It's the only way we do it. It's never fun. It's a lot of time wasted. I wouldn't advise an audit every year and all of that, but, like, get your books reviewed, get your stuff in order, make sure your tracking is set up the right way, make sure there's some basic governance and notes and things like that, because the bigger strategics will care about this sort of thing. You don't want your deal to break over the stuff that, quote unquote, doesn't matter, right? Like, this stuff doesn't matter until it matters, right? So that's one piece of advice that I would say. And I do think too that building to outlast stuff, like, habits that allow you at the end of the day to be cash flow positive in this environment are hugely attractive, right? Like, I think the empty calorie growth days are generally over. They may come back for some moment in time, but I really think building to last and showing. I love, what I always like to ask, I'm like, I want to know what dividends these guys are paying themselves, especially when it's small D2C types. Like, that to me is the ultimate. Like, how much money can you actually pull out of this thing? Like, that's what I want to know. I don't care about EBITDA or this or that. Like, what are you actually able to do to take out? Like, I want to know the real cash flow in the business. And I think in general, D2C is heading towards, and is already at a point where we're talking about profit margins and cash flow.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, Chris knows that I love a good financial audit and making sure the books are in order. And so you really tickle my fancy with that one. I can promise you that. I mean, it is. Yeah,
I think that we need to make our way to Canada, and we need to come. Do we need to do one of these shows IRL in person up in Canada? I think
100%.
I think
we would love.
That's the move.
Love to host you. Yeah.
All right. Well, if we make our way up there, we gotta come to the office and make this happen IRL. There's so much interesting perspective you have, having gone through the post-COVID era, and now what's happening in e-commerce, and then finding these incredible businesses that are now part of Emerge. To me, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Listen, I invite you anytime here. We have hundreds. Pick one of our hundreds of golf courses. We can bring the barbecue. We can grill some meat, and we can
let's go.
We can do it all at once. But I'm a fan of what you guys have done for the space, and you're building a name for yourselves, and I'm excited to see where you take it. But I love the energy and the authenticity, and just the variety of ideas and people you have on. So keep it rolling. You have a fan in us over here.
Oh, we appreciate that. We appreciate it, Ghassan. We will do that. Man, tell everybody where to find you, where to follow you online. Man, is there anywhere you're dropping knowledge on LinkedIn, etc., that people should be following you, brother?
Yeah, you know what? Like, somehow LinkedIn became my thing. I know it's cringe, but it works. It works. I can't tell you how many investors we've gained out of LinkedIn. And when it came, so I am on there. I keep it real. No AI, no nothing. Ghassan Halazon on LinkedIn. On X, I'm at Insta, GINSTAJEE.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome. We appreciate you making the time to join us, brother, and we look forward to having you back. Look forward to seeing you IRL in Canada. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.